Hey everybody, Vince August here. It is June 3rd, 2020, and what I wanted to do today is something different. I wanted to attack the policing issue from a perspective of not just dealing with this situation to situation, because I think that's what we tend to do in the country. So we have the situation in Minnesota, the situation in Kentucky, and what we do is we treat that situation. So we charge, these individuals, we put them in jail, we bring them to justice, and then we move on. And all that is if you have cancer in the body, that just isolates a couple of tumors, and then you move on and say, well, we took care of it. And that's really not taking care of the situation. That's just, treating those circumstances. And I think that's what we do as a country. We treat circumstances and never really address the entire issue. When it comes to police, just so you know my background, I've been a criminal defense attorney since 2000. I'm a licensed attorney since 1996. Got into criminal defense in 2000. Was a municipal court judge in 2008 until 2013. You could look up why I left the bench, and then went back to criminal defense. I also do other kinds of law work. Also, in complete candor, I do have a family member that's a police officer. I also do help out with fundraisers for police officers. So I've seen both sides. As a criminal defense attorney, I've made cops look really, really bad in court. As a judge, I've administered justice in what I think is a very fair manner. And you can ask some of the police officers in a town where I was a judge. And yet at the same time, I could see the good work they do and, the mistakes that they make that cost lives. So that's my perspective, just so you know where I'm coming from. The list that I'm going to go through that I think will help change police departments will probably upset a lot of those police officers. But you know what? In order to make change, things get a little bit uncomfortable. So let me get straight to my list. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is not all of the things that I think will cure all of the issues with police departments. I think it's a good starting point. You could, of course, add to this list. You could amend it as some of what I'm saying you may say is, kind of an arbitrary way to start. So, for example, the first thing, I think there should be a starting age for police officers at age 30. I think the idea of letting someone go to college for 4 years and 22 years old, hand them, a gun, a badge, a race car, basically a race car, and that kind of authority to go out and dole justice to a community that is older than them and has lived a different lifestyle. I think that in and of itself is a problem. Whereas if you have people that have worked and been part of a community and know what it is to work, whether it's a 9 to 5 or multiple part-time jobs, know what it is just to try to get through a day, pay your bills, and go from point A to point B without being stopped for rolling through a stop sign or, going over double yellow lines, and just, being a member of a community and working and being a productive member of society without immediately trying to enforce laws. I think that will give a police officer perspective of what the person that they're stopping is going through on a normal day. Because, normally the people that came before me in municipal court were, for the most part, just people going through their day. I've always said to officers, you have to understand the frustrations of the average working person. And I don't think you can understand those frustrations if your only basis of knowledge and experience is 4 years of college. And I think, that also goes for military. I think you need to shut down. I don't know that going straight from military to police work is a good transition as well. I think that's one stressful position to another. So I think starting at age 30, I think you've become more mature. I think you've been a member of society. You've been working. You've been dealing with people. For men, your testosterone levels are way lower. I think it just puts you in a better place. Look, me personally, I see what I was like in my 20s as compared to my 30s. I'm a different human being. So that's the first thing with regards to the age. The other reason I like the age standard at 30 is because I don't want the police profession to be something that you get into at 23 years old, you put in your 25 years, you retire at 48 years old, and that's all this is. This is, let me just put in a quick 25 years, I'm going to collect a 70% pension after that, and basically I'm going to live off of a pension longer than I was a cop. Because that's not what, and this goes for two professions, police and teaching. That's not what those professions were. People would tend to be police officers into their 60s. Same thing as teachers. You had teachers teaching it, well into their 60s. I don't think the job of being a police officer should be one that you say, you know what, look, I'm going to get in 23 years old, 48, I'm done, get my pension, go do a part-time job and out. So I think if you start at 30, having worked, now you know what, you're going to be a police officer into your 50s. This is not a quick solution to getting a pension and moving on. The other thing, and this is a big one for me, I think police officers should absolutely live in the community that they police. I think if you live in the community, you are more vested in the community, one. It is your neighborhood. You have more at stake than just going somewhere, enforcing law, and then going home to wherever you live. You are protecting the people that you live with. You're protecting your neighbors. You are working with your neighbors. And at the same time, you have more empathy because you understand the people you are working with. You understand the dynamics of the neighborhood. You understand the demographics of the neighborhood. And it's more communal. That's what the serve part of protect and serve is. You just have a better relationship. So I think officers should live in the community. I don't think the community that they police should be something foreign that they just go put in their hours and then go home and it's become somebody else's headache. The other thing, depending on how they do the hours in different towns, I know that now they're moving hours, there's Kelly hours and there's all kinds of different things, and police shifts. I think one of a police officer's weekly shifts should be out of a police car. I don't think a police officer should be put in a police car for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, drive around patrol, because the image that the community gets is a guy in a tank with a shotgun and a computer, and that's the level of interaction. I think one of those days should be either walking a beat where again, you get to know the people in the town, you get to know the shop owners, you get to know the business owners, walk around, become more face-to-face, have that face-to-face recognition, I guess, is what I'm looking to say, of the people in the neighborhood. Or it could be as much as working in, like the PAL. I know we used to have that in Hackensack, the Policemen's Athletic League, where you work with kids. And the kids in the neighborhood, as they grow up, there isn't a fear of you. There's not this intimidation of you. They come to know you. It's, hey, that's Mike the cop, or whatever the situation might be. I think that would be something that would change the dynamic for police officers. The other thing is, and this is where we get into controversy, I think the first 2 years that someone is on the force, they should not be given a gun. I think you should have to partner with someone that does carry a firearm, and I think you should not have a firearm for the first 2 years. The reason for that is I think a police officer should learn to use all other skills at their possession before that becomes a choice. I think if you learn to use all of your other tools at your possession, and using a gun becomes a last tool, I think that will help reduce the threat of violence. Now, this is a big one that's controversial with police officers, because they're like, well, then you're putting cops in danger. Well, no, because that cop is going to be with someone with a gun, first of all, because they're going to be partnered up for the first 2 years. You don't just throw somebody out and throw them in a car. Maybe that's part of the problem. They should work with somebody who is a senior, who does have a weapon, one. Two, if there's a 911 call to a dangerous situation, that's not the officer that responds. You don't send an unarmed officer to respond to a call that involves a threat of violence. So I think that's a better way to start to introduce officers to the use of firearms, and if it's not a first choice, if it's not a first instinct, I think it just works better. The last thing, and I don't want this video to go too long, again, this is not an exhaustive list, is the police officer in his function of government. And this has less to do with the police officer and more to do with our government. If you have a police force and the purpose of the police force is to generate income for the town in the form of tickets, summonses, you're creating an agency that isn't there to protect and serve. You're creating an agency looking to raise financial resources and justify their existence. And I think that is part of the problem here. I think part of the problem here, especially in the suburbs, is you're creating an agency that its main purpose is financial through the use of law. And that's not really what the law is meant to do. The law is not meant to be there to create finances for government. It's there for justice purposes. It's there to make sure that people obey laws so other people aren't put in danger. A stop sign is not there to generate income for the town. A stop sign is there to avoid accidents at an intersection. Same thing with the traffic light. Same thing with speeding signs. You know, the speed limits are not there to have a means to give tickets so people pay money to the town. Speed limit is part of, look, this is the stopping distance, this is the danger based upon congestion and amount of cars on the road that would lessen fatalities on the roadway. If you weaponize the laws to become a means to raise finances, well then that's all you're turning a cop into. So, look, I think this is a start, and I think this is where conversations need to start to really work on a cure for the system, as opposed to just treat instances of police violence. I don't think you could really do it the way we've been doing it, because clearly it's not working. I'll tell you this, most of the police officers I've talked about this stuff, a lot of them don't have problems with it. If they do, it's because they have a problem with an issue that affects them specifically, where it's like, well, I don't live in that town. Yeah, well, of course you're gonna have a problem with it. The gun thing, you know, I know it's a problem for some officers. A lot of officers are like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Look, I don't know. These are some of the ideas I've floated out when I've spoken at some of these situations, community situations. A lot of people tend to like the idea. Let me know in the comments. You know, look, I don't have all the answers, but I think you have to start a conversation somewhere. Anyway, this was my first shot at it, and willing to talk to whoever wants to listen, and, you know, maybe we could do this on a Facebook Live. Let me know.